Now that I think most of you have audio on and can hear me, to introduce myself as Hugh Weber, welcome you to the Design Observer Studio Sessions, and to pass things your way, Jessica.
We can't see you, Hugh. Is that intentional? We like looking at you when you talk to us. There you are. That's Hugh Weber, our managing director. Thank you all for joining us. This is such a big group and a lot with our wonderful guests, and so thank you. We usually begin by talking about where we are in this moment, which of course is Groundhog Day upon Groundhog Day. So I was thinking earlier about what's different about this week, and I can't think of much that's different about this week. We're acclimating, some weeks are harder than others, but occasionally a news story floats across the transom, and I saw one this morning that I thought was a typical Design Observer story, which is that Ai Weiwei, the Chinese dissident artist, is issuing a series of masks on which he's printing, making prints. So using the mask as a canvas, and he's auctioning them on eBay to raise money for Doctors Without Borders and other humanitarian efforts, which is a wonderful altruistic thing to do, and he's an incredible guy. But it raised some interesting questions, at least for me, such as this sort of merging of the disposability of a mask and the making of art, or the lending of his name and reputation to something that helps people, which is wonderful, but does it in a way that is on eBay. And it's an auction. And so the economics and the sort of cycle of operation, I think, is really interesting. This question of disposability, especially, of course, hygiene and printmaking. I could go on, I won't go on, but it really was the kind of thing we like to talk about on Design Observer. And one of the reasons we have tonight with different guests, one of the reasons we started the cooperative, is to try to engage not only people, but topics that are interesting to them. So Michael, what's going on for you? What have you seen that's interesting to you this week? Michael froze.
I had a huge breakthrough since the last time we spoke. And can you hear me okay? Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you. I can hear you, but your video is lagging, but we can hear you all.
A lot of images are frozen for me on my screen, so we're really taxing this thing. If you can hear me okay, I'll continue. Since the last time we spoke, I went on Amazon and ordered hair clippers, and I gave myself a haircut. My frozen image won't let me show it off properly, but if I unfreeze sometime, I'll zoom in. And it was the most satisfying physical experience I've had in the past 4 months, maybe all year long. I would even I compare it to pre-pandemic things I did. It was just so great. I feel like if I came back to life, I would be a barber. There was just something so great about just kind of cutting my hair and having all the hair fall to the ground. Yes, Chip, I would say it was that satisfying. There was just something really pleasing about it. The sound of it, everything was great. Wow. The buzzing of the clippers, wow. the way, the sense of transformation, and the fact that I felt like neat and crisp when it was all done. I was very pleased with myself. And I was really scared to do it too. I sort of like had a lot of images. You hardly think so, given my appearance, that I'd be worried and that I don't have that much hair. But I was like really gratified that it came out okay. And then I was able to, it kind of put gas right in my tank, and I was ready to kind of face another month or two of this at least, I think. And I can give people haircuts if they want them, with masks on, I suppose.
But not on Zoom, Catherine. I think we're going to get right into this because we have a lot of interesting questions to ask our fascinating guests. So if that's okay with everyone, I'm just going to launch into my introduction to Chip Kidd, who really should require no introduction. So I was thinking of all the wonderful stories I could tell about Chip as I'm starting here tonight. And one of them is that he gave a talk once in Barcelona in which his introduction to the talk was so funny, I don't remember the rest of the talk. And I would do my introduction now if I could even do half of Chip justice, but I can't. Is everybody hearing me? I know there's a lot of frozen screens. Are we good? No, okay, can I get a show of, can I be heard? Am I being heard? Yes, no, good.
Yes.
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 Oh, Nancy Sharon Collins can hear me. This is a wonderful thing. Waving to Nancy Sharon Collins. Okay, fantastic. So Chip Kidd has been a book designer for 25 years, working for Knopf in New York. The list of people that he has worked with is really astonishing. I'm just going to name a few: John Updike, Katharine Hepburn, Whoopi Goldberg, many writers, Haruki Murakami. I think this relationship between books and design is something for us at Design Observer that's kind of near and dear to our hearts. We've been involved with the 50 Book Show for a million years. But I want to sort of start by asking Chip to talk a little bit about the chicken and egg relationship of books and design. Because you're a writer, you're an editor, you commission, you're a big reader, and you make book covers. If you look back at the last 25 years, was there a moment when it started and you knew that this was the path for you, or did you fall into it and get lucky? And how did all those things come about?
Totally fell into it and got lucky. Absolutely. And by the way, it's 34 years.
Is it really? And you're only 35.
That's correct. Yes, I started as a zygote. Yeah, no, I just got really lucky. I studied graphic design in college at Penn State University, and all I knew was I wanted to go to New York City and get a career as a graphic designer. And I interviewed everywhere. Pentagram, Massimo Vignoli, when Mr. Bierut was still there, Milton Glaser. I really wanted to work at M & Company for Tibor Kalman, and no, everybody was really supportive, but I just nobody had an entry-level job at the time, and I really wanted to start working. And the long story short was Random House, Alfred A. Knopf specifically, they had an entry-level position as being assistant to the art director. And I was offered it and I took it, and I was 22 and it paid $15,500 a year.
More than my first starting job. But what did they give you to do starting out? What did you know how to do?
I'm sorry, what did I what?
What did you know how to do? Like what had you been trained to do as a book designer? Yeah.
Well, I mean, really not much at all. I didn't know much at all, but this was about, I'd say, at that place in time, 6 or 7 years before and we were using apples at all. So everything's done by
And we're losing Chip.
I was gonna say, this is the magic of live broadcasting. Jessica?
This is the magic of live broadcasting. Chip has a new computer. He's quarantining in Palm Beach. He told us he might have some problems. He told us things might freeze. So I'm going to throw this over to Michael. And maybe Edel's computer system is working a little bit better. We might do this a little bit different right now. Michael, let's move over to you.
Thanks, Jessica. Chip will wait for him to make his recovery. There is lots of things are very shaky on this line across the board, it seems like tonight. Usually we do this, in the past we've done this like in the middle of the day on Saturday, where maybe the internet is just more supple in those days. Who knows? Yeah. But Edel, let's pass to you while Chip excavates himself from his frozen state. You came to the United States from Cuba as a little boy and arrived in the country, and I picture you being on that boat in 1980 on the famous boat lift. Were you an artist then? Were you drawing what you were seeing, or did that happen later?
No, man. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, at that time, I was, when I was a little kid, I drew in Cuba sort of for fun, and I would draw a lot of the things I saw in my town. But once I arrived in the United States, I was just trying to, it was kind of a culture shock, you know, you go from one place where I didn't have any books growing up in my house, you know. I didn't have any access to art or design. So you go from that to the United States where, you know, you can go to the library, you have art classes, things of that sort. So I really became much more interested in art, I think about fourth, fifth, sixth grade, when teachers started encouraging me to follow and continue making my work. Yeah.
And you were so committed, at least I know from your biography, that you, even though you had a scholarship to go to University of Miami, you turned it down to go to New York to study at Pratt, right? So you must have really been determined at that point.
I don't know. A lot of it is just sort of crazy. You know,
Bad
when you look at,
decisions.
you know, everyone, you know, when people interview me or do articles about me, it appears like there's some sort of master plan, and it's really just a series of accidents. And I think that's the same for everyone. And that's my best advice to students is to not plan so much and take every opportunity and try to squeeze all you can out of that single opportunity. So for me, my family, I thought of getting into the military when I was in high school because my family didn't have any money for me to go to college. And I thought, oh, well, you know, maybe I could make some money in the Army to pay for college. And then when I told I went to there was a recruiter in my high school, and he lured me to his office. And when I went to talk to his office to talk about the military. When I went home and I told my mom started sobbing and screaming at me, like, how dare you try to think about the military? That's why we left Cuba, so you wouldn't have to go into the military. You're in this country, you don't have to go into the military. We'll figure out a way to get you to college. And through that process and application, I did receive a full scholarship to go to the University of Miami for art. And but everyone in my high school, all my teachers kept telling me to go to New York, leave Miami, leave Florida, and go to New York. And I had a really good art teacher. I had never traveled anywhere, you know, never been on a plane. And this art teacher arranged a plane trip for me, had a former student that was going to Pratt Institute come visit me. And when I went to New York, he was kind of like my guide for 3 or 4 days. And once I finally got to New York, I just fell in love with New York. And I went back and told my parents, you know, I have to go there. And we got into a big fight about it. So.
And did you have go ahead, Jessica.
No, I just wondered, like, it sort of sounds like your story, Michael. You came to New York and wanted to come to New York and be in New York and stayed in New York and made a life there. I haven't had that life. Chip, you a little bit had that life. But I wondered,
Yeah,
like,
Chip
how
has
your
lived the
work
dream entirely. Yeah.
Chip has lived the dream and Chip is back. We're waiting for Chip. Bring back in.
I'm back. Can you guys see and hear me now?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I'm just going to stay on my phone because my desktop computer is just being weird, and this should be fine.
Chip, when you did you have a dream of coming to New York? Were you told that everyone from Pennsylvania was fated eventually to make their success in Gotham?
Well, I mean, if we're going to be totally honest here, basically, I knew I was gay from a very early age, and I stayed in the closet all through college, and that was actually part of the plan. And I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania in a loving but very conservative family, and I just needed to break away. So that was actually part of the impetus to do that, is that I could finally be myself. And of course, but at that time it was the fall of 1986, and so you know, AIDS was, you know, big and scary and all of that. So it was like proceed with caution. But I definitely wanted to, you know, all the great graphic design firms were there, and that's where I wanted to be. And yeah, I mean, it worked. I mean, when I started at Random House, I thought, all right, this really wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but let's give it a shot and see what happens, and at least it'll give me a start. And so many things happened, even just that first year, in terms of the regime, editorially, art directionally, if that's a word. You know, Louise Feely was there at the time. She was just down the hall, and I worshipped her. It was just really kind of cool. But like before I got frozen out, and Jessica was saying, like, I mean, I really was just doing. I wasn't really doing any real design work for about, I'd say, a year and a half. I was doing all the follow-up stuff, dealing with the freelancers, following through on, you know, like the spine of the book and the flaps and that stuff that all needed to be dealt with, but the actual designers didn't really want to do.
Do you remember your very first, when you got to do your very first cover, what that cover was? I know you must remember. What was it?
It was a totally dreadful cover for a book on how to do photography by a guy named Jonathan Hedgecoe, and it's truly awful, truly awful.
Did you get to do the flaps too and the spine?
Yes, I did. Now, as a matter of fact, I just happened to have a copy of it right here. And this is really embarrassing. Can you see that?
There it is.
Voila.
Sprockets and all. So
Yeah, no,
You're hired. You're hired. Hey,
so I had been hired by that time.
Edel, when you got to School of Visual Arts in New York, was it what you imagined it was going to be? You had never been in New York before, and that was your dream, and you got there, and was it what you thought? I mean, what surprised you? What did it, I know you didn't have a plan, but when did the plan start to formulate based on your experience there?
Well, it was Pratt, and I'm sure they.
Oh, sorry, Pratt. I'm sorry.
Clarify.
Yeah.
So
the best art school in the country. Yep.
I had a funny visit when on my plane to New York. A supermodel sat next to me, and she was telling me all about her supermodel life in New York City, and then offered to share a cab to Brooklyn with me and drop me off and gave me her phone number. So to me, it was like, oh my God, New York City. And once I got to Brooklyn, it was like everything that I had watched in television. It was like the Cosby Show, or all these red brick buildings, and it's a part of America that I had never seen. I'd never seen America. I came from Miami, and Miami was what I thought the U.S. was. Then when I went to New York City, it was this whole other world. And I went there because I was between between advertising and architecture. Actually, I was still thinking of being an architect.
Really? Huh.
It was the responsible thing to do.
Yep.
And that's partly why I went to Pratt, because Pratt has an architecture school.
Yeah, it does.
And I was there for about 6 months in, and I had a roommate that was an architecture major, and he was not having fun at all. He was really not enjoying what he was doing. And I was in the art school, and in the art school, we were doing so many different things: painting, sculpture, things of that sort. And finally, at the end of the first year, I had to make a decision what to do. And I had a teacher that I loved, and she said, "You're an artist, you're not an architect, and you're not an ad agency person. Go be an artist." And I changed my major to painting after freshman year, and I became a fine arts painting major all through Pratt. I graduated, and but I while I was at Pratt, I was trying to get some skills so I can get some work. So I started working at the school newspaper as a graphic designer and illustrator, and I had enough work that when I graduated Pratt, I was able to get a freelance job at Spy magazine, doing basic layout. Like what Chip was talking about, was just the things that nobody wants to do. So I was doing that at Spy Magazine, working with all the other great art directors that were there at the time. And then from that little bit of work that I got at Spy, I got an interview at Time Magazine, and I went to the interview, and they said, well, we have nothing now, but someone's going on jury duty. Do you want to start just for 2 weeks, temp, at Time Magazine? And I was like, okay, sure, I'd love to. And the temp job at Time was delivering copies from office to office to every editor and writer, basically what email does nowadays. I was doing at Time Magazine for about 3 to 4 weeks, delivering mock-ups and whatever paperwork needed to be done. And I would pass by the design department, and I would just say, hey, you know, I know how to design things if you guys need any help. And on a weekend, they needed a lot of help. And on a Saturday, and I started working at Time Magazine doing very basic design. And I ended up doing that for 9 months out of a 2-week temp job. I turned it into 9 months freelancing. And then I finally got hired 9 months later as an entry-level designer at Time.
Wow.
Edel?
Yeah.
Back to the 2 questions that everybody is concerned about. Who was the supermodel?
I have her name.
And why on earth was she going to Brooklyn?
She wasn't. She shared I figured out after the fact. She shared the cab through Manhattan, dropped herself off in Broadway, and then I had to go to Brooklyn by myself. Yeah.
All right.
And her name is Elizabeth Jolie. And I looked her up now, and she was actually on the Seinfeld show as she was Seinfeld's interest for a few episodes.
1 episode.
Yeah, and I actually wrote her a note, I think like 5 years ago, saying thank you. I still remember you. That was so wonderful what you did. It was a nice way to be welcomed into New York.
Chip, did you ever get any rides from supermodels that you'd like to tell us about? And then I'll ask you more serious questions, but that's my serious question for now.
No, but when Sandy bought his apartment at the police building, Cindy Crawford still lived there, and Linda Evangelista. And I used to see them in the lobby without makeup.
And live to tell the tale.
And they had it. They brought it. It was good.
I think she was not a supermodel. She was a regular model, but I was 18. So she was a supermodel to me.
All right.
Super enough.
Yeah, everyone's yeah.
Chip, I'm just wondering.
So
when
I
want working. Okay.
I'm sorry, what?
Rose, Michael. So when I started out working, I remember thinking I was working for a series of writers, and one day I went and wrote a sample script, and I got picked up on a development contract, and I started writing for television. Not very good television, but it was how I got my start as a writer. And I wonder, at what point after designing book jackets did it occur to you that you could also write a book?
I'd say I was about 10 years into the job, and you're just constantly reading as a book cover designer. And at that point, I had designed 2 books for David Sedaris, and he was the real inspiration to me. And I also, he and his sister Amy in the 90s, they were writing plays. They were writing off-Broadway plays. And I was going to them, and I was just absolutely blown away by just how absolutely hilarious, and she was starring in most of them. And so I kind of got to know them, and it made it seem real, like you could actually do this. But my first paying writing gig was for Graphis. And I don't even remember how it came about, but what's his name who runs it? We were talking
Peterson?
at Marty Peterson. And we were talking at some AIGA party or something, and I was talking about all the people coming in now to see me with their portfolios, and just how strange it was, because just a few years ago I was trying to show people my portfolio, and the fact that anyone wanted to show me their portfolio for a crit was just like amazing. And he's like, do 800 words on it. And that, I don't know, that kind of got me started. And it was writing things for print, because I didn't discover Chris Ware, but I was the first to do a major publication with him. And so then I did a whole profile on him for Print Magazine. And it was just a great way to get started, because frankly, to write for design publications, you don't have to be very good.
Nice knowing you, Chip.
No, I don't mean that, but
Hey, Chip, that's Design Observer's tagline, actually. In my mind, for me at least.
No, but it was a foot in the door. It was a foot in the door. It wasn't like the New York Times was going to be saying, "Hey, why don't you write this or that?" So it was just my way in, because that's what I knew, and I knew the people who were commissioning the writing. And then I started, I don't know, thinking about the experience that I had in college as a graphic design student with these two incredible teachers, Lanny Samis and a guy named Bill Kinzer. And I started to think about the idea that there was a novel there. And it just kind of evolved from there. But at that time, again, like the whole thing, you know, tracking down an agent to represent a piece of writing, 90% of it is just getting it into their hands so that they'll at least read it. And at that point, I was able to do that. I was able to say, could you just look at this and see what you think? Like, should I put it in a drawer and forget about it, or should I be pursuing this? And it went on from there. But the first novel took 6 years to write, and the second one at least that.
Yeah. This is leading to an interesting question that came in from the audience from Edel Rodriguez. And it has to do, I think, with both your stories in a way. So I'd like to hear both of you give a point of view on this. You know, so much of what, Edel, you said had to do with just, you know, being in, you know, you felt you had to come to New York. Once you were in New York, you have this, you know, series of internships, you get this gig at Time, and then you're just doing grunt work there, and you sort of say, hey, I know how to do design. We could use you on the weekends. And suddenly, you know, within a matter of moments, virtually, you're one of the youngest international art directors they ever had there. And Chip, you know, you sort of are, you know, it's, you know, your contacts with the Sedaris siblings and, you know, all these other things. It's all made possible in a way by the fact that everyone is together in a place like New York. And now we're all kind of, we're all nowhere basically. And I wonder whether, and this was specifically Raul's question, is it a design mecca? Is it going to be necessary for people to come to the big city to seek their fortune, given that big cities have sort of, the feature of big cities that made them so popular had to do with density and congestion? And those are things that are not going to be particularly popular for the foreseeable future. What do you think? Has that changed? And if you're a young person graduating this year, and you have an opportunity to go somewhere, should you? And should it be New York, or should it be the opposite?
Well, I would say if you have the opportunity to, then go. But if that's what you want, because so much has changed in the 30 plus years that I've been doing this, way before all of this awful stuff that's going on now that's forcing us apart. Which is the whole idea of like, hey, want to look at my portfolio? Here's a link. You know, and that just wasn't what it was about. But I think I did very much physically want to be in New York City. I'm dying to get back. I just miss it so much. And but you know, my advice for a 22-year-old starting out now, I really don't know. I mean, it's tough. I have no sort of like magic answer or advice, and I think we all are still in the middle of this particular moment right now. And at the very least, you know, you can design at home on your computer, and you know, that wasn't the case when I was 22.
What about you, Edel? What do you think? You're in New York right now. Do you feel you're in the place to be, or?
Well, I'm actually in a secret location, not in New York City.
Fun.
But I say New York City. So.
Oh, that's right. You're in the greater New York area. I
Yeah,
believe.
the big New York City area.
Yeah. You and I are sharing the Garden State at this moment. We may as well.
Yeah. So, I was a kid in a small town in Florida, and I know what that's like. And I've been in New York City, in a big city with a lot of things going on. And I wouldn't want to be 18, 20, 21 in Miami trying to be a designer artist, because there's something about a big city like New York City. You can be on a computer and you can get, you know, business, okay? But you don't get the culture of New York City. You know, in New York, everywhere you go and almost every function you go to, it's other designers, and you're talking about these issues and you're learning, and they have tips on jobs. Or I compare it to, you know, like a forest where there's, you know, 1,000 trees, and there's always little, you know, fruits dropping here and there. You live in Miami and there's like one tree, and it drops a fruit every once in a while, and everyone's going for that one fruit because there's a job that was one place. So New York is like that. There's a lot of, and there's also, if you've you've come to New York, the people that are here, they go out of the way to help you in many ways, because you made an effort. You're in New York. Oh, you showed up at the Pentagram offices. Come in. Let me tell you about this. Everybody wants to kind of help each other. So for that, it's important for me. And also, I can go into the city, you know, any Tuesday and see 10 great gallery shows and 2 incredible museum exhibits. And then in 3 months, it'll be, you know, some great new shows again. So it's this constant revolving door of art and influence that I don't get when I go to Miami. I have my family in Miami, and I go there, and I'm there for about 5-6 days, and I'm like, all right, that's enough.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me about both of your stories, and this goes to questions that are always coming up when we have these sessions. There's always students and young designers that are facing sort of this weird pandemic moment. And I think, having never, you know, if you've never graduated from college before, this is the only experience you have of graduating from college. And if you're doing in 2020, that experience is completely colored by this weird moment we're in. But I think both of you kind of have stories that are like, you know, it's not like if you graduated in 1980 like I did, or 1990 or 1985 or 2000, you had a plan, and you could just simply execute that plan because there was no pandemic or there was no something else. You sort of just have to be ready to be lucky, and be ready and be curious and be out there and sort of make those happenstance discoveries. I have one question, which is, just as Chip kind of, you know, among other things, sort of went from being a art director and designer of other people's books, originated by other people, then started originating your own books, and then finally started writing your own books. You know, you went from being an art director who I assume was commissioning illustration and conceiving of ways to bring the news to life at time, to being the person who was commissioned. How did that happen? That's sort of like, that seems like a really, to my mind, a tough switch to make, to kind of go from, you know, to go from being a commissioner to the kind of person who would be commissioned. Or am I reading it wrong?
Well, I was doing illustration, as I said, for my college newspaper. Then even while I was at Pratt, I got my first job to do something for the Village Voice. And then I started doing something for the New Yorker in about 95, 96. I was doing regular illustration for the New Yorker while I was working as an art director. So there was a lot of overlap over the years. And it wasn't a complete shut off between art director to illustrator. I was doing a little bit of everything for many years. And in one way, being an art director at time helped me understand how the illustration business works, how people are hired, what kind of work stands out, things of that sort. So it was sort of a behind the scenes of how illustrators work and promote themselves, and what art directors want to see, what makes strong magazine covers. That helped me sort of think a lot and develop my own magazine cover style or graphics. I learned a lot by being an art director and understanding simple things like cropping an image, how that can affect artwork. So I learned a lot more actually in real life after college than I did before that in terms of design and illustration.
Edel, I'd like to ask you a question, slightly different question, which is about the content of your work, and particularly now, given the complexity of this moment and how political art and political forms of expression can actually make a different kind of impact. At what point in the evolution of your time at Time and at SPY and all these places, did you start to think about making work that took a point of view politically? And how have you seen the impact of that work resonate over time?
I was always interested in politics. I mean, part of it was having come from a childhood where I had to leave everything behind because of politics, because of communism. So we had to leave my family, come to the United States. So even when I was 14, 15, 16, my favorite topics and subjects were history and social studies, World War II, the Holocaust, all these things. I was the most serious teenager. And it came naturally to make art about that. So I always gravitated towards the opinion art. I've done many, right from the beginning. I started, my first jobs were for the New York Times op-ed page, doing opinion graphics. And it kind of evolved, slowly evolved into what it is now. I've just, I like the idea that a magazine cover, I mean, I do paintings and I have my own studio work, but the idea that if I have a show, maybe 200 people will go see it, but a magazine cover gets seen maybe by 1 billion people. So that much, having my work be out there to that degree is always really attractive to me, that you can have a bigger impact with the work and that it stays around. I'm not trying to change minds or think that I can, but I do want to mark history. And I want my covers to be seen 10, 20, 40 years from now, the same way I look at covers from around 1930s in Germany. I think if you can't make a change, the least you can do is document what's happening.
And now that you can't go into New York City and go to 6 galleries and 4 museums in a day, and you are in an undisclosed location somewhere in the vicinity of New York, what are you working on?
Right now, I'm doing my I have a lot of work going on all the time, and I'm working on a book, a memoir about my life growing up in Cuba. It's a graphic novel that it's being published by Metropolitan Books. When I finish it, maybe next year or the year after. I'm supposed to finish by January. So I'm working on that, a graphic novel memoir. Fixing the yard. There are so many house projects now that I can't say I don't have time for.
Chip, you're working on a graphic novel. Speaking of graphic novels, can you talk about what you're working on?
Yeah, well, I'm working on a graphic novel in the role of editor, art director, and publisher. So it's the writer artist is a guy named Pat Dorian, and it's the life of Lon Chaney, the pioneering silent film star from the early 20th century, and it's called Lon Chaney Speaks, and it's going to be out, I think, in October. We've been having to rearrange our publishing schedules a little bit, but I think that's on schedule. And I publish a Japanese cartoonist named Gengaro Tagame, and we just published his book, My Brother's Husband, This was in 2 volumes. This is volume 1 of 2, and we combined them into 1 volume, and that's just out now. And it just sort of goes on. Work. We're putting the finishing touches on the spring 2021 season, which for me includes covers for Haruki Murakami, Martin Amis, James Merrill, and a biography of Sybil Bedford. So there, it's just been great. The whole Penguin Random House through this whole situation has just been extraordinary. Yeah.
I want to bring in a couple questions that are coming from Anna and Emma and a handful of others that I think kind of builds off of that, the idea that they're being extraordinary, the idea that practice is shifting. A lot of these questions are in the space of how you are all 4 of you, frankly, coping creatively in this current environment, what you think the lasting impacts on creative practice and process might be coming out of this. Some of these questions about, is New York the Mecca or not, I think are tied to this. Michael, people specifically pointing out how much studio practice is a part of the pentagram environment, and in this moment where that's not as possible, kind of the impacts. I would also encourage you, we've still got 90 people sitting in, feel free to share in the chat box how you're coping in this space too, but maybe we start with you, Michael, and then work through the panel here.
About how coping, you mean?
Just how you're coping with quarantine from a creative perspective.
The thing that there's 2 things that are happening. I'm sure this is true for some people in the session this evening. That there's sort of our opposite ends of the spectrum. Normally I work in a big office with 100+ people. I manage a team of a dozen plus, and to a certain degree, it's amazing how efficient Zoom is. You can just sit locked in your chair, and if you just schedule everything, then you click out of one thing and something else starts up, and people are sharing files. You can go on Slack and download things. It can really sort of almost stimulate in a kind of a deceptive way the kind of energy and vitality of the creative process that happens in a collaborative sort of way. And I can't tell you how often I'll be talking to someone on my team, and we'll be going back and forth, and I'll sort of say, oh, no, do something more like this, and I'll draw something, and I'll just point at it, and I'll say curve the top of it and have it, and it's almost like being there, sort of, but it's really not. And there's this weird, the thing that happens the other end is that there's just this sort of like draining kind of quality to it. And, a lot of it just has to do with the 1 pixel deep, frustrating flatness of the experience you're having. Working with other people doesn't, I used to have this, I had a great aunt who sort of, as she got older, got progressively a little bit more mentally unstable. And she used to, she was legendary when I was a little kid. I was kind of in awe of her because she would cut pictures out of magazines and kind of put them on chairs and say they were her friends and talk to them. It sounds sad now, but I thought it was like magical when I was a kid. But I sort of feel like I'm in the
sad camp.
And I sort of feel like her. I have these flat pictures, and they are my friends, and they talk to me, and I talk to them, and they like me. But I think you exist, all of you, but maybe you don't.
That's a Betty Davis movie from the late '60s.
Oh, it actually happened? It's a real thing, a movie that I saw? I thought it was by Anne. Okay, there you have it then. I'm like Ronald Reagan thinking he was in actual combat when he was actually in a movie about combat.
Jessica, you just made the transition from true isolation, kind of sheltering in LA, to now being with family in New Haven. How is that shift even over the last week?
I feel like a method actor. I've seen the dark side. I spent 9 weeks by myself in a room, walking in circles, doing 8 miles a day, and now I can walk outside and see one of my children, who of course is grown up enough to not want to see me all the time. But I will say that for me, unlike for Michael, well, we at Design Observer have a sort of virtual team, and so we're used to actually communicating this way. But I found myself very, very productive when I was by myself. And we started a project. I wrote a column on being a maker in the pandemic for about 6 weeks. And we're now going to do a book with Thames and Hudson of my essays and Ralph Waldo Emerson's original essay from 1841. And I am having more fun designing this book and editing it and writing it and working with the team at Thames and Hudson in London. And I have no idea why. I'm like the child who's been starving, who's been sent to a buffet table. And yet it's 2 typefaces, there's no images. It's a very limited palette of options. And I think something about quarantine, something about coming back from 9 weeks alone, something about the fact that it's a little bit of my writing, it's someone else's writing. I'm working with Jarrett Fuller, a wonderful designer in New York. We go back and forth with layouts. We hold them up a little bit like Michael does. Mostly we take screenshots and put them in chat. It's a sort of a funny way to work, and yet it's a productive way to work, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm kind of finding my way back to the studio. I mean, I did as a painter after I gave up Winter House, and I have had various phases of that over time, but quarantine, it has its challenges. But for me, being productive, at least in my little limited way, is not one of them. Finding, going to a restaurant is a bigger challenge. Of course, there aren't any, or seeing my friends, or being able to, as Edel says, go to a museum or feed myself, nourish myself in other ways. But I'm reading more. And that makes me actually want to throw it next to Chip, because you told me a story earlier today. I'm hoping you could share with everybody about the fact that we're all reading more.
Yes. So first of all, let me say that I am by myself this whole time, and I'm lonely as fuck.
We love you.
Other than that, we had a town hall with our CEO this morning, a woman named Madeline McIntosh from Penguin Random House. And I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but the news is pretty amazing. We're having a better year than last year. And this meeting went on for over an hour to sort of break it all down and explain like what's up, what's down. And it's really amazing and inspiring, really, in a way, because a lot of it's about readers finding books and finding ways to buy them and get them, because on Amazon, books went to the back burner, which really hurt us for the first couple of weeks with all this, because they were too busy shipping all the things that you would think, like hand sanitizer and masks, and that books went to the back. So our salespeople had to think of other avenues and ways to get books into the hands of readers. But just things like sales of juvenile books are way up because all the libraries are closed. Sales of, and this is obvious, but sales of workbooks for kids, through the roof. And then things that we just got lucky. We published John Grisham's new novel, which is about the aftermath of a hurricane on an island, which has been just even bigger than his books normally are. Oprah picked one of our nonfiction titles as her one pick during the pandemic, so we got very lucky. But what's been a huge challenge is not for what I do. For what I do, it's very simple. But for production, copy editing, and distribution, it's very, very challenging. Very challenging for all of those people, and a huge strain. But we're doing all right. We're doing all right, and which is great for, as far as I'm concerned. I still get to keep my job, which I love. But also just the thing like books are filling in gaps that things like sitting in a theater can't. And of course, audiobooks and ebooks and these things that you can get instantaneously, and you can listen to something while you're taking care of your kid, or you know, just all of these things that are just pronounced during this time.
Yeah, I've been sorry. I've been working on a Jimi Hendrix biopic illustrated book for about 3 years, and I thought it was going to be held off or something, and no, they want it now. And another children's board book that I had to do in about a month, and it's coming out in the next season. So it's not like everything has stopped. This will be over. I mean, I got a call to do a Broadway poster design 2 weeks ago, and I'm doing it now.
Can you say what show it is?
I can't. I'd love to.
It's called in an undisclosed location.
Sounds like
it's one of my favorite actors, and he was a black guy in Pulp Fiction.
Oh wow.
So you know, and when I was like, I thought it was spam, actually. I thought it was someone joking with me. Oh, we want you to do a Broadway poster. I was like, you know, and then it's true. And it's happening. And I asked, what's the deadline? And they're like, well, we don't know about that yet, but we're going to do it. You know, overall, my working method hasn't changed. I've been a loner for 10 years now, and I'm just alone in my house. Just my kids are around longer, so it hasn't really changed my working method. I actually prefer to work alone and not as a team necessarily. If anything, now it's like people bug me for Zoom calls when I didn't have Zoom calls before, you know? I used to get an email for the job, and they're like, so here's the job. Can we have a Zoom call? I'm like, I don't want a Zoom call. Why? So I'm used to working like this, and I actually, you know, like it quite a bit, so.
You know, one question that we haven't talked a lot about, though, is you mentioned that one of the constraints you have, Edel, is that you share your studio with young dance students. Have there been any implications of having children around and having family around in that way?
Oh, I think it's great. This is the first time, I think, where it's just amazing to have a family because you're not alone. You know, I think that you know, maybe you know, in the past, you know, single people in New York City are always like making fun of you. Oh, you got to go home to your kids. Oh, we're gonna stay out all night or whatever. And now it's like people that are single are wishing maybe there were more people around. So in that sense, it's really wonderful. It's, you know, you have a group of people that you can chat with every day and check in what they're doing and this and that. So yeah, it's really great. It's really wonderful.
I've got a question for both of you. I think both of you guys have in your careers done work that was controversial and deliberately so. I mean, Edel, it's, you know, you're very well known now for the political work you've been doing since the last election and created some of the images that are probably going to appear in history books when people are talking about, you know, the opposition to the Trump administration. I have no doubt about that. But Chip, you've made some really risky decisions about book covers. I'm thinking, and this goes way back, but I'm thinking of that Andres Serrano cover you picked for that book about the New Testament, where you picked a very controversial artist to go on, and with a fairly shocking image to go on a book about, you know, the life and death and presumed resurrection of Christ. For both of you, and I'll start with you, Chip. When you're kind of evaluating risk, how do you know when to take it and when not? And when you've done something that makes people mad, how do you cope with that?
Well, I mean, I think the risks are calculated, and I think you have to decide to what extent is it worth taking a chance on something, and it's you know, I really do have the support of my colleagues and the people who have to approve all this stuff, and it's, you know, that's just like, that's extremely valuable. I mean, now, just as an aside, and this isn't really part of your questions, but my company, Knopf has gone through utterly catastrophic change in the last year, and there was the whole new regime was just put in place right before this, just before we got the work from home order. So it's just been really interesting to see, like, how we're going forward from here, and it's working. It's working, but there's a whole new set of people who have to approve the work, and if they're not sympathetic with what you're doing, then it doesn't matter like how controversial you're going to get with it. Now on a freelance basis, like there's controversial and there's controversial. One of the freelance things that I'm most excited about in the last couple of months is I've been doing a series of comic book covers for Marvel. And the first one is a Spider-Man reboot by J.J. Abrams. And JJ asked me to do the cover for it. And I'd never done work for Marvel before. And that's the cover. So as far as Marvel was concerned, they're like, well, you're out of your fucking mind because there's no type on it and there's no logo on it. And what the hell? And
it's Spider-Man's eye? It's just close to his eye?
Yeah. And it's die cut.
And
sorry, I'm here by myself, so I'm.
It's a spider web?
No, it's a spider.
Spider.
Right?
Yep.
And all of this was done with spray paint and stencils. It was all done by hand and then scanned in. So, Marvel was like, no. JJ was like, yeah, yes, Marvel, you're going with this. You're going with this. So this came out last fall and completely blew out. And so then Marvel's like, oh, gee, would you do another one of your die-cut covers for our new Wolverine comic that's coming out in January? And then like, oh, would you do one of your die-cut covers for our new Spider-Woman comics that's coming out? And this is one of the last comics to be released right before the pandemic. This came out on March 18th. And so, are these controversial? No. But for Marvel, that's weird and radical and WTF. So, but it's Jessica, I'll never forget when Bill used to give his talks and his first line was, great clients make great graphic design. And that's totally true.
He said that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, he said that. Sure. When you're working with magazines, do you find resistance to some of the ideas that you have, or how do you make that calculation?
Well, I had kind of a plan to all this. In a weird
You did have a plan. Okay.
Yes. Rarely. Sort of a suspicion that if I did something, maybe something would happen. I mean, or a hope. And the hope was that if I started stirring the pot early, which was back in 2016, or late 2015, 2016, doing things that were out there that were kind of a little dicey and putting them on the web myself. But if I did that enough, it would get into the bloodstream of editors, art directors, people that follow my work, and that would cause them to hire me to do that kind of work. Because I didn't want this president to be treated like every other president. So if you look at every cover of Time or other magazines of Bush and Obama, it's usually a picture. Bush goes to war and you show a picture. So, but every time you show a picture like that, it makes it more presidential. It makes it more real. So I wanted to try to deny that, try to get in the way of that and break that up, and to treat this guy as a different animal altogether. So by putting my work out there long enough, I was doing it for about a year. Then in August of 2016, like right before the election, the art director of Time called me, DW, and he says, "Hey, I've been seeing what you're doing online." And it was getting so much audience response, that I think they wanted. They saw that it was getting attention, and he says, "I like what you've been doing. Do you want to do something like that for us?" And I was like, "Wow, here it is." They're actually paying attention, and they said, I like what you're doing. Can you do something like that, but with the face of Trump melting down?" And I did this image here, right? And that came out, and that got all over the internet immediately, and it expanded what I was doing. My audience was maybe, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000 people on my Twitter and Instagram, and then it became kind of a worldwide thing. And then after that happened, it opened the doors. Der Spiegel saw that cover, and then asked me to do another cover, and I ended up doing this one for them. And it all builds on itself, you know. So that's how it started. But it really started me kind of taking my own little personal risks online. And every time I did something, I just felt, well, is this going a little bit? Oh, whatever. Let's do it. Let's see what happens.
I just have to say that something has happened tonight that's never happened on a studio session, and it never happens in any of my Zoom calls, which is the holding up of work, and everybody is responding to it in this wonderful way. We're not sharing our screens. There's no PowerPoint. It's wonky. It's immediate. It's great. And I think that we together have created a new genre here. And it gives me hope for Zoom. I'm just so did it. It's so exciting.
Well, we're talking about things, and I figured we should see them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, so it was, and every time I did something like this one was like, oh shit, what's gonna happen with this? And I actually, I told my friend, I was at an opening, and I said, he's like, how you doing? I was like, well, I just did something. I think it's gonna be a problem when it comes out tomorrow, and it was, you know. And then when I did this one here, that was putting a Klan hood on the president. That to me was scary as hell, you know. Being Hispanic, what's going to happen when people see this? And yeah, I got a lot of emails that were threatening and comments online and all sorts of things. But I felt these things needed to be said. And right now, I mean, that's denied him overall. I think I denied him about 15 magazine covers that would be a decent photo of this guy. And that's an historical record. He's an asshole for life now. So that's good.
And you do something that I really admire. You also, to an amazing degree, when you post your work online and the community that follows you. I remember the first time in the early days when I started following your work and discovered you, which was actually before all this, but when you really started doing the political things with Trump. And I saw that, like, on your Facebook page, I think you were encouraging people, you know, here's a bunch of designs. If you want to make your own signs, it's fairly easy to do. And like, what's funny is it is sort of like really early on, like with that melting face cover, you sort of reduced. It's like one of the most kind of simple, minimalist, emblematic caricatures I've ever seen. It doesn't have any of the kind of political cartoonist nuance where you're making a kind of exaggerated features, Nixon's big nose, or, you know, Jimmy Carter's buck teeth and all these other things. It's instead, it's just this like a shock of yellow over orange, a black mouth, and just a black open yelling mouth and some teeth, and you've got it. It's so easy to copy. And if you copy your work and then take it out in public and send pictures, you'll sort of like post the pictures on your Instagram feed, and you know, and sort of just extend kind of like the idea of not just admiring the work but making it into the community. It's kind of an amazing way of propagating on all these different levels.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I couldn't do it all myself, so I was asking for help basically to get the stuff out there. Yeah. And little kids would make posters because they're really simple to copy. I think I'm not a political cartoonist. I'm not. I'm an artist, and I happen to make art about politics and what's happening. But I don't get any joy out of making people's features look worse. You know, I don't get any joy out of making bad looking teeth or making people obese or anything like that, because that in itself is making fun of something that someone doesn't have any control over, you know. So I just like to stick to the facts and to make work that can't be denied by someone saying, "Oh, you're just trying to make him look, fat." I'm like, no, I'm talking about he's a KKK guy. It's all about ideas. It's not really about himself necessarily. I want to make it about him and people that either ignore him or follow him. You have to pay attention to this stuff because it's very real, and we're seeing it every day.
Yeah.
We have a number of questions that I think maybe we popcorn around a little bit, but questions. Chip, why don't I ask you this? Is there a project or a passion project that you're dying to do, or something left to accomplish that sits out there as an ambition or aspiration?
Besides seeing actual human beings.
Yeah. This is the thing that somebody should never say, but you asked. So I'm trying to write my third novel, and this should be like the perfect circumstance to do it. And I was about 80 pages into it before all this happened. And I just sit and try and concentrate, and I like tick, 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 bling. Oh, look, it's email. I don't know. I'm better than I was when I first got down here. I was a total basket case, and there was a couple different reasons for that. And I'm very much less so now. And I've got to like get back into it. I know exactly what the story is. I know what the beginning and the middle and the ending is. And now I just got to write the damn thing. And I know me, it's going to take me a while, but like, that's probably the biggest passion project I'm working on right now. I'm doing two. I love Peanuts. This is a big book that I did for Abrams. Came out 5 years ago. We're doing a new edition of this with a different cover, and I'm doing another thing for the Peanuts people, and maybe something after that. And I love that, and I love working with them. His widow Jeannie is just perfection. She's just wonderful. But in terms of personal projects, I'm just trying to kick my ass and write again.
Yeah, Hugh, it is funny. If someone would have told, there was a thing that someone asked me to do something back right at the beginning of the year, and I said, well, I don't know if I'll have enough time. And if someone would have told me, hey, what if we could fix it so for months on end you didn't have to go to work, and not only that, but you weren't even allowed to leave the house. If you could get around to this project, then I would have said, oh, sure. How could I not do it? And it's exactly the same, Chip. I swear to God, it just is. It's like, I'll do anything not to start on this particular project. And I want to do it, but I just kind of can't make myself. And, email, that Slack thing came in. Oh, thank you. What could that be? So, but Edel, you sort of mastered it. I sort of look at your studio / dance rehearsal space, and it just seems like it makes you be creative. And there was some people kind of going back and forth in the chat thread about whether some people like collaboration and a noisy place to work, and other people just can really be productive on their own. It sounds like you're in that second category.
Yeah, even when I was at Time Magazine, I had an office. I was doing the international edition, and the staff was basically me. It was me with a photo editor that was far away, and I was tucked away in a corner of the main art department of Time Magazine. And I don't know, I've just always liked working that way. And here in my studio, I've done 10 children's books, and so many book covers, for various publishers, all this, and I'm always just doing it on my own. I like my process, and not much has changed, like I mentioned, and if in some way I'm getting more things done because I'm not going to things. I basically go to the city to dance. I dance salsa and Latin music. I go to parties that are like salsa parties with a bunch of Cubans, and that's all over. The salsa bands aren't playing. that's pretty much all I go for into the city, and have meetings and things like that, and see some gallery shows. So that distraction is no longer there. So I'm just focusing on a lot of things that I've been putting off.
There've been some questions, and the chat is active enough tonight that I can't find the initial thread, but some questions around the role that mentorship played in your creative development, and maybe how you see mentorship now that you're further along in your career.
Well, it's very funny or coincidental that would be asked, because 2 weeks ago I volunteered for the mentorship program here at Penguin Random House. So there are people like you, people apply for it, and within the company, I mean, it's a big company, so there's a ton of people, and somebody says, I want to learn how to do X with this person. And so I'm mentoring a young guy who's in mass market interior design and wants to break into book covers. So I thought, sure, why not? But it's literally the mentorship program. So, and that I can do. I taught for 6 years at School of Visual Arts in the 90s, and some very good things came out of it. I had some really good students, but it basically taught me that I was not cut out to be a teacher. I'm not good at it. But mentorship, absolutely. I mean, like I said, these teachers I had in college were just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, on a personal sort of reaction to actually what's happening politically, is that having been an immigrant, raised in Miami, every mentor and everyone that helped me along the way was a white American who opened up everything for me, opened up doors.
Including the supermodel.
Well, not her. Not her, but my high school art teacher, Mary Buckley, my freshman year painting teacher, and people at Time, Arthur Hochstein, the person that introduced me to Time magazine, all these people. And I don't like what I'm seeing here politically in this country, where there's this whole other segment of America that's turned kind of evil when I know there's so much goodness in this country, and that is upsetting me, that I wouldn't be here doing what I do without the mentors that I've had. And all these mentors were Americans that welcomed me as an immigrant, and they weren't jealous. They didn't say, oh, this is for me. No, they welcomed. They said, here, let me teach you how to do this. Come here, come do this. They gave me so many opportunities. And I don't like what's happening now, where this native thing where America for America, and we're not going to help outsiders, this and that. It's not what I know this country's about, and it's not what I've experienced my entire life. I would be nowhere without that help.
Yeah, in the midst of all this.
I just want to say one thing, which is that I had really mean teachers. They were assholes. They were male, they were privileged, they were white, they were German, they were anti-Semitic. Need I go on? Except for Paul Rand, who was all of those things, but not an anti-Semite.
Yeah, he was equal opportunity. Yeah,
he was a pro-Semite.
Yeah.
I promised myself, if I was ever going to be lucky enough to be given the opportunity to help someone else's education, I was not going to be like that. And so many of the things we're doing at Design Observer, the cooperative. Yesterday, Hugh and I did an Instagram live where we talked. There were so many students on it. I'm just so aware of that I think now, hopefully, there's a generation of educators out there and mentors out there who are not mean. But
by the way, I had some of those too. Okay.
Where they thought they were going to shape you and make you tough and make you better by being so critical, telling you had no talent or telling you that you were inept.
Yeah, I was in communications design for about a semester at Pratt, and the head of the department, I wanted to switch to painting, and the head of the department said, well, you're never going to amount to anything, so you can go anyways. So those things happened, but the good people, there were good people along the way that sort of opened a lot of doors for me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, when I was, Edel, you were talking about kind of, the immigrant experience. And I was doing this project for a while, just on Instagram as a little self-assigned kind of like morning exercise where I would I take a book down, I take some old, an old and sometimes kind of like rarish design icon-y sort of book down from my bookshelf and just shoot the cover of it in some pages, and I'd write an extended caption to it. So it would be, Herbert Bayer's Geographic Atlas, City Different Container Corporation, or Brodovich's Avedon Capote book, or things like that. And I did about 20 of these. And as I was doing them, I realized, wow, most of these designers were not born in America. Part of it had to do with the fact that a lot of them were emigres who were fleeing, Europe during the rise of Hitler. But just this influx of talent that happened, whether it was, from Germany, from Czechoslovakia, from France, it was just astonishing how it really shaped the way, graphic design specifically was practiced in this country. And the idea that anyone thinks that there's something to be gained by just like sealing all that off seems preposterous to me. And I think I've got the proof of it on my goddamn bookshelves. You just sort of see all the evidence of the work that happened because people were permitted to kind of inspire each other across borders.
Bauhaus fled Germany for Illinois.
Yeah, exactly.
No, for New Haven.
Well, all right, but both.
Or North Carolina.
Chip, there's a very specific question Paul Needham asked that actually am intrigued enough to throw out there for you. So he has two questions. Are you in favor of the A novel tag on covers? And do you feel competitive with UK designers when you're working on different editions for the same book?
Those are both good questions. All right, so here's one of the industry tricks. Like, let's say I'm doing a design for a fiction. And I have a design that I really like, but I'll leave the blurb "a novel" off of it, and then I'll show it to the editor-in-chief, and it's funny, you would look at it like, should it say a novel? Like, oh, yes. Okay then, approved. Now, it didn't always work, but it just, like, people need to feel like they're contributing something. And it's like, that's better than like, ooh, make it turquoise,
Much better.
which is often not helpful. The whole British thing is just so bizarre to me. They're looking at, now this is Penguin aside, I would say, because the Penguin designs by and large are brilliant, and this guy David Pearson does them to this day, and he's brilliant. But to me, Murakami is like a perfect example. Like, they've had the same person, and I can't remember who the publisher is, in the UK doing all of his book covers for his first edition novels, and she uses the same typeface every time for years, for like over a decade. I don't understand that. But that's what they feel works for their market, and we go a different direction. So I really don't know why. Although, sometimes the Brits will use what we're doing, and other times we will use what they're doing. I forget, the last time I used a British design was for a series of essays by the guy that wrote The Golden Compass, and I can't remember his name. I'm sure somebody in the audience will.
Philip Pullman.
Oh, Philip Pullman. And the cover for it, and they had done theirs first, and we're like, you know what, this is great. Let's cut our losses and just use it. And so, there's back and forth, but it is interesting. It is interesting how, they're different.
one of the things that's happening, this is going to sound like a pitch. I'm going to let Jessica and Michael ask one more question here before we wrap up fully. One thing that's happening in the co-op is some really interesting conversations of the group that's there, the subscribers that are there. And I see Jan from Code Switch Design, who's one of our founding members. So to give him a shout out and say hello. But we have a number of students on the call. We donate all net proceeds of these sessions to Design for America. And we've got a number of students in the co-op space. So a design teacher asked, kind of carrying on from Edel and Jessica's conversation, how can I be less of an asshole and more amazing? What do you think is most important in preparing our design students? I'd love to hear from the four of you, and then perhaps go to a final question.
Well, all right. At the risk of a product pitch, my first novel is called The Cheese Monkeys, and that's what it's all about. Now, the teachers that I had were amazing, but they were mean. But they were always mean with a point and with a purpose. So it wasn't like you have no talent and you suck. It's like, you know what? It looks like you spent about 20 minutes on that and you had all week. So you better decide whether you want to be in this class or not. So it was usually about students who were trying to like coast or weren't taking it seriously. And that they had no time for. But then it would be the opposite. Like you had different degrees of talent of the students in any given class. And just because there would be examples of like, okay, there's this one student that they're not as talented as maybe the most talented kid, but they work their fucking butts off and they need to get rewarded for that. And so it's, that kind of stuff. That's how you, frankly, not be an asshole, but I think, being critical is fine, but there needs to be a point behind what you're saying.
And I would add to that. I said to my daughter, Fiona, if I make it to 80, I want to have a party for all the students I ever had. And she said, can I come? I said, come. I'm telling you now because you have to stay in touch with them. You're hosting the party. So I think that the most gratifying thing about being an educator or being a mentor is staying in touch and seeing how your garden grows and seeing what happens to these people. It is the most marvelous thing. And I had teachers who did tell me I sucked and that I had no talent. A painting teacher told me I was the most untalented painter in the world, and a graphic design teacher who told me I had no right being a graphic designer. Now, maybe by being that mean to me, I was challenged to just prove them wrong. But I think now that I'm so many years on the other side of being an educator, that I think the answer is to listen to them, that listening is key, and trying to understand how their mind works so that you can help them help themselves to cultivate that mind and that skill set and that purview and that understanding of the work they're going to make in a way that they can cultivate their own garden. And that's very hard. But I think I got better at it over time. And the proof is in the pudding, because when they do stay in touch with you, and I hope they continue to, because I am going to make it to 80 and have that party, it's really amazing to see what they do. And the world, of course, keeps changing. And so we need to prepare students to answer questions 5 months from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. Who would have thought we would be facing this? And I think about this a lot, and certainly the moment now that we're in now, you're a lone ship, but you're a grown up, and if you're 20 and you're alone, it's really hard. And they don't have the wherewithal, they don't have the understanding of their own ability to make things or to give themselves projects or to start or to stop or to know how to get their work out there. And I think anything any of us can do. And on that note, can we all wave to Emma? Emma's on the call. Emma has been on every call. She's there, beautiful Emma. She's been on every single one of these calls. She's an amazing young designer who's just graduated and probably needs a job. So get in touch with her. She's amazing.
Hey, Edel, could I ask you what advice you would have for a teacher who doesn't want to be an asshole but wants to be an effective teacher nonetheless?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh. My favorite teachers and the one teacher that I go back to a lot, it was actually Mary Buckley, and she was a light color design freshman year teacher at Pratt. And what was interesting about her is that she never had any concrete information. I kept going. So what do I do next? What do I do? And she's like, "What color is the sky?" And I would be like, "The sky's blue." It's like, no, it's not. It isn't blue. Look again. And she would make you wonder. She would have these things that would make you. It was a 6-hour class, so she would just, what color is the light in the room? And she would go every 2 hours. She's like, "What color is the light in the room today?" And I'm like, "What are you? You're crazy. There's no color in here." And it was through her that it made me see things that I didn't know existed. I didn't really notice that they were there until she told us. She banned black. She's like, "Black is not a color. Black does not exist in nature. Make your own blacks." Things like that. Things that are really these abstract things that even years later, as a designer for a book cover, I'm thinking about Mary and the things she's saying in my head and things of that sort. So I think sometimes the worst teachers, I had one guy that would grab my canvas and start painting on it and, take a palette knife, move things over, turn my canvas around and start painting behind it very aggressively, trying to. So whenever I teach a class at SVA, I was teaching at Pratt, I try to stay back a little bit and understand that all the students have their own quirkiness, and that's what's going to make their work stand out, is bringing that quirkiness forward and bringing it out. And what I try to encourage is to have them have more of an opinion, have more of a voice in where they come from, what they do, what their background is, so that they can put that into their work. Because many times they're very shy about doing that, and they mostly want to copy things that they see outside of them. And I really want them to work from what's inside their heads, and that takes a long time. It could take all 4 years of college, and maybe they don't figure it out till 2 or 3 years after they've left college. But that's what you want to teach them, to kind of be more of themselves and less trying to do whatever 3D technique or this other technique, whatever. It's not about that.
This is fantastic. It's always a marvel to me that 90 minutes, 82 people stuck around for 90 minutes to have a conversation like this on a Thursday night. Let's just through visual signs and demonstrations of celebration, some gratitude for Chip Kidd and Edel Rodriguez. Thank you so much to the two of you for joining us tonight. Thanks to Jessica and Michael for hosting us, to the Design Observer team, which includes Betsy Verdell and Blake Eskins. Again, we're excited that net proceeds for this gathering go to DFA. We hope you'll check out the Design Observer Cooperative, where a lot of great conversation is happening. But mostly thanks to all of you for taking the time tonight. I'm going to pass it back to Jessica and Michael to say goodnight.
We did go a little over. Thank you for staying. I just sent this note to you, Emma, but I meant to send it to everybody. Ida Wessel, can you wave Ida? Ida woke up in the middle of the night to attend. She's in Stockholm. We're really happy that you came, Ida.
I've been watching Matt Willie. Did he finish the wine bottle? He's been on a wine bottle for an hour. Did you finish it?
I'm with
Mission
you.
accomplished, Matt. Thank you.
I'm a wine box. A box.
Yes,
Because
yes, he drinks it out of the box. I'm so glad you brought it. Thank you.
if you drop it, it won't break.
Matt is the most chill person. He's just there like this,
Thank you all for staying.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Let us know if you want to do it again. Stay home, stay safe. Michael, anything to say?
Thank you.
Talk to you soon, Jessica.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Much love to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip.
Thanks, Adele. Thanks, Chip.